Hi, welcome to the Silent Avenger channel. If you're enjoying the content, please consider giving it a like and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Let's dive into today's story. My name's Salvatore. I'm 42, and for as long as I can remember, my life has revolved around food, family, and tradition. I run an Italian restaurant in the UK that my father built from scratch when we moved here from Sicily. It's more than a business, it's our legacy. My wife, Connie, has been part of this journey for over 15 years. At least, I thought she was. Lately, things had felt off. Connie was distant, checking her phone more often, laughing at messages she wouldn't share, and coming home late with flimsy excuses. Dinner with the girls, she'd say, but her lipstick was too fresh for a night out with Maria and Lisa. At first, I thought I was overthinking. Owning a restaurant is stressful, and I figured maybe I wasn't giving her enough attention. I tried harder. Flowers, surprise dinners at home, even taking a rare night off. But she barely reacted, brushing off my efforts with a quick smile or a distracted thanks. Then came Tony. Tony is the younger brother of Enzo, a family friend. He's always been a bit of a charmer, the type who acts like he owns the room even when he's just borrowing a chair. He started showing up at the restaurant more often, always lingering after hours, chatting with Connie while I was busy in the kitchen. It wasn't blatant, but something about the way she looked at him felt wrong. One evening, I walked into the dining area to grab my phone, and there they were, standing a little too close, their laughter stopping abruptly when they saw me. Tony muttered some excuse about needing to leave, and Connie pretended to be busy wiping the counter. That was the first crack in the image of my marriage. Still, I told myself I was being paranoid. I wanted to believe in her, in us. But the doubt had been planted. And doubts, as I've learned, grow roots quickly when they're watered by suspicion. I'd never been the jealous type, but now I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in my gut. It wasn't just her late nights or her sudden defensiveness, it was the way she seemed to have disappeared from our life together while still being physically present. I decided to find out the truth. After that night, I couldn't shake the image of Connie and Tony standing too close, their laughter cutting off like I'd caught them mid-sentence in a secret conversation. I started paying more attention, watching, listening, piecing things together in my head. Connie's habits became my clues. Her phone, which she used to leave lying around, was now glued to her side. If I walked into the room, she'd quickly lock the screen. When I asked about her day, she gave vague answers like, "Oh, nothing special," or "just busy." Then there were the excuses. "I'm going to visit my sister," she'd say, only for her sister to call me the next day about something unrelated, not mentioning any visit. When I asked Connie, she'd shrug it off. "You know how forgetful she is," she'd laugh. But the breaking point came one Thursday night. Connie said she was meeting Lisa for dinner. I believed her until Lisa and her husband showed up at the restaurant for a last-minute reservation. "Lisa," I said, my heart thudding. "I thought you were out with Connie tonight." Lisa looked genuinely confused. "No, we haven't made plans in weeks. Is everything okay?" I forced a smile and nodded, my stomach churning. That's when I knew I couldn't sit back anymore. That night, after Connie came home, smelling of wine but not looking like someone who'd been out with a girlfriend, I decided to test the waters. "How was Lisa?" I asked casually as she took off her heels. "Oh, it was nice," she replied too quickly, not even looking at me. We talked about her trip to Spain. I didn't push it, but I felt the rage building inside me. She was lying, right to my face. I needed proof. Something concrete. So, I started being more observant. I noticed that whenever Tony came by the restaurant, Connie seemed livelier, more animated. She'd touch her hair, laugh a little too loud, lean in just a bit closer than necessary. Tony, smug as ever, would glance at me like he was testing how far he could push. One evening, after everyone had left, I checked the staff room camera feed. We keep them for safety reasons, and normally, I don't bother with them unless there's an issue. But curiosity, and suspicion, got the better of me. I didn't find anything too obvious, but there were moments. Moments where Connie and Tony lingered a bit too long, standing shoulder to shoulder, talking softly, leaning close. Moments that might not scream affair on their own but felt like pieces of a bigger puzzle. I needed more. Once I saw those moments on the camera, my mind wouldn't rest. I wasn't just imagining things. Connie wasn't just distant, she was hiding something, and Tony was part of it. I felt like a fool in my own home, in my own restaurant. The next step was to be sure, And for that, I had to be smart. No rash confrontations, no accusations, yet. I needed to catch them in a way they couldn't deny. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Connie told me she had to stay late at work to finalize some bookkeeping. That was strange because she hadn't handled the accounts in months. We had an accountant for that now. "Don't wait up," she said, planting a quick kiss on my cheek like she always did when she was rushing out. I played along, kissing her back and smiling as if I believed every word. But the second she left, I grabbed my jacket and car keys. I waited in the parking lot near the restaurant, hidden in the shadows. Sure enough, a little over an hour later, Tony's car pulled in. He parked a few spaces down from Connie's car, got out, and casually walked inside. My chest tightened, but I didn't move. I wanted to storm in there and confront them, but I needed to know what was going on. I waited, my fists clenched so tightly my knuckles ached. After about 20 minutes, I moved closer to the building. I didn't go in, there was no need. I had my phone, and I knew where the exterior cameras were positioned. I opened the security app and switched to the live feed. The sight made my blood run cold. There they were, in the dimly lit dining room. Connie was sitting on the edge of a table, laughing at something Tony said. He was standing in front of her, his hands resting on the table on either side of her hips, leaning in far too close. And then it happened. He reached out, tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear, and she didn't flinch. She didn't pull away or scold him. Instead, she smiled and rested her hand on his forearm. I felt sick. That was it. That was all I needed. It wasn't just a harmless friendship or a misunderstanding, it was real. They were crossing lines, and Connie was letting it happen. I didn't confront them that night. I couldn't. I drove home and sat in the driveway for an hour, staring at nothing. Rage and heartbreak swirled inside me, but I knew I had to keep my cool. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. After that night, there was no going back. I couldn't unsee what I had seen. Connie's smile, Tony's hand brushing her hair. It played in my head on a loop, like some sick, cruel joke. But I wasn't ready to act just yet. I needed to be smart about this, to be sure I had enough to confront them in a way they couldn't escape. The next day, I started digging. Connie had been careless with her phone lately, keeping it close, yes, but not as locked down as she thought. I knew her passcode, a date I never thought I'd come to resent, our wedding anniversary. When she went to take a shower that evening, I took my chance. My heart raced as I unlocked her phone, feeling a mix of guilt and determination. Her messages with Tony were under his contact name, plain as day. At first, the texts were innocent enough, updates about work, questions about restaurant supplies. But the further back I scrolled, the more personal they became. Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about it. One message from Tony read. "Me too," Connie replied. "We need to be careful though. Sal's been asking questions." The rage that simmered in me boiled over. This wasn't just some emotional affair or flirtation. They were fully in it, sneaking around behind my back. The audacity of them, using my restaurant as their meeting place, my life as their playground. It was like they didn't even care if they got caught. I took screenshots of the messages and emailed them to myself. If this was going to get messy, and I knew it would, I wanted everything in writing. The next step was tracking their movements. I started checking her car mileage when she said she was running errands. The numbers didn't add up. She was driving farther than her stories accounted for. Once, she claimed to be at the shopping center, but her location on the Find My Phone app showed she was parked outside a hotel. A hotel. That night, I stayed awake long after Connie had gone to bed. I couldn't sleep, couldn't even close my eyes. I sat at the dining table, staring at the evidence I had gathered so far, the texts, the mileage, the inconsistencies. It felt like my whole life was a lie. I wanted answers, but more than that, I wanted justice. This wasn't just a betrayal of love, it was a betrayal of everything I stood for: family, loyalty, respect. They had made a mockery of my life, and they were going to pay for it. I just needed the right moment to make my move. The texts and mileage logs weren't enough for me. I needed undeniable, in-your-face proof, not just for myself, but for when I finally confronted Connie. If I was going to call her out, I wanted to see the guilt on her face, to watch her crumble under the weight of her lies. The next time she said she was meeting the girls, I decided to follow her. She left the house around 6 p.m., dressed to the nines, far too polished for a casual night out. "Don't wait up," she said, smiling as she slipped out the door. I gave her a 5-minute head start, then got in my car and tailed her. She didn't head toward Maria's neighborhood or Lisa's place. Instead, she drove across town, straight to a boutique hotel that I recognized from the location tracker a week earlier. My stomach churned as I watched her park and walk inside, her heels clicking on the pavement like a countdown to the end of my marriage. I waited in the car, debating my next move. Part of me wanted to storm in right then and there, but I knew it wouldn't be smart. Instead, I bided my time. About 15 minutes later, another car pulled up. Tony got out, glancing around like he was trying to make sure no one saw him. He didn't look nervous though, just smug, like he thought he had pulled one over on the world. I watched as he walked inside, then waited a few more minutes before getting out of my car. I had called a friend who worked in the private security business earlier that week, explaining my suspicions. He had loaned me a small high-resolution camera disguised as a button, perfect for situations like this. I walked into the hotel lobby, trying to act natural. "I'm meeting my wife," I told the front desk clerk. She barely glanced up, too busy scrolling through her phone to notice my tense demeanor. I knew which room to look for. Connie's texts had mentioned the number in passing when she told Tony she had checked in early to avoid suspicion. I went straight to it, my heart pounding. When I reached the door, I stood there for a moment, my hand hovering over the doorknob. I could hear muffled voices and laughter inside. I knew what I would find, but hearing it made it real. I knocked, my voice steady as I called out, "Room service." The voices went quiet. A second later, the door opened just a crack, and there was Tony, his face pale when he realized who was standing there. Before he could react, I shoved the door open, stepping inside. Connie was sitting on the edge of the bed, her face frozen in shock. She stammered, trying to come up with an excuse, but I didn't give her the chance. I held up my phone, which was recording everything. "Save it," I said coldly. "I'm not here to talk. I'm here to collect the truth." Tony tried to act tough, puffing out his chest, but I ignored him. My focus was on Connie, who looked like she wanted to sink into the floor and disappear. "I gave you everything," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "My love, my trust, my life. And this is how you repay me." She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. I turned and walked out, leaving them both in stunned silence. The proof was on my phone, and now, the ball was in my court. When I got home that night, I didn't even know where to start. My emotions were all over the place: rage, sadness, humiliation. Connie had been my partner for over a decade, and now, everything I thought we had was gone. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the recording on my phone. The proof was there, undeniable. She didn't come home that night, which only solidified everything for me. The woman I thought I knew was with someone else, and she didn't even have the decency to face me. The next morning, she walked in like nothing had happened, carrying a coffee cup and scrolling through her phone. She didn't even look at me as she set her bag down. "Good morning," she said casually. I didn't answer. I just slid my phone across the table toward her. "Press play," I said. Her face froze as she glanced at the screen. "What's this?" "Just watch it," I said, my voice calm but cold. She hesitated, but curiosity, or maybe guilt, got the better of her. She pressed play. The color drained from her face as the video started, showing her and Tony in the hotel room. "Salvatore, she began, but I cut her off. "Don't," I said, my voice rising. "Don't insult me by lying again. I know everything, Connie. I've seen the texts, I've tracked your lies, and I've got this video. So spare me whatever excuse you're about to come up with." Her eyes filled with tears, but they didn't move me. "It's not what it looks like," she whispered. "Not what it looks like." I barked a bitter laugh. "Do you think I'm stupid? I saw you with him, Connie. I've seen enough to know what's been going on. Months of this, right? Months of sneaking around, lying to my face, disrespecting everything we built together." She started crying, but I wasn't done. "I gave you everything," I continued. "And you threw it all away. For what? For him? A man who can't even hold down a job, who has no respect for anyone, not even himself." "It was a mistake," she sobbed. "I didn't mean for it to happen. A mistake." I slammed my hand on the table, making her jump. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the store. This was a choice. Every text, Every lie, every meeting, you chose this, Connie. Over and over. She buried her face in her hands, crying harder, but I wasn't finished. I trusted you, I said, my voice breaking. I loved you. And you didn't just betray me, you disrespected me, our marriage, and everything we've worked for. Do you know how humiliating this is? Do you even care? I care, she cried, looking up at me with mascara-streaked cheeks. I care so much. I'm sorry, Salvatore, I'm so sorry. Sorry. I shook my head. You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught. I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. This marriage is over, Connie. You destroyed it. I don't know how you're going to explain this to your family, but I'm done explaining anything to mine. Pack your things and get out. Her face crumpled. Sal, please, she begged. We can fix this. I'll do anything, therapy, counseling, whatever you want. Just don't throw us away. You already did, I said quietly. Now go. Connie didn't leave right away. She sat there, sobbing into her hands, muttering things I couldn't make sense of. Part of me wanted to walk out of the room, but I didn't trust her not to try something dramatic. So I just stood there, arms crossed, waiting for her to process what I'd said. After what felt like forever, she finally lifted her head, her face a mess of tears and streaked makeup. Sal, you don't mean this. We've been through so much together. You can't just end it like this. I shook my head, biting back the urge to yell again. I didn't end it, Connie. You did. The second you chose Tony, this was over. You made that choice, not me. Her lips trembled, and she looked like she wanted to argue, but I cut her off. You need to pack your things. Today. I want you out of this house by tonight. Where am I supposed to go? She whispered, her voice cracking. Not my problem, I said firmly. Go to your sister's, rent a hotel room, call Tony, I don't care. Just get out. She stared at me, like she couldn't believe what was happening. Sal, please let me explain. It wasn't serious. I got caught up in something stupid, and... Stupid. I interrupted, my voice rising again. You threw away a 15-year marriage for something stupid? Don't stand there and insult me with that nonsense, Connie. You made your bed. Now you get to lie in it. Her tears started again, but I was done. I walked out of the room and headed upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind me. For the next hour, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall while I listened to her moving around downstairs. By the time I came back down, she had a suitcase by the door and was sitting on the couch, her face pale and drained. She didn't look up when I entered the room, and for a moment, I just stood there, trying to process what was happening. This woman, who had once been my everything, was now a stranger. Do you need anything else? I asked, my tone flat. She shook her head. I'll come back for the rest later, she said quietly. No, you won't, I replied. Send someone else to get it. I don't want to see you again. She looked like she was about to argue, but she stopped herself. She stood, grabbed her suitcase, and hesitated at the door. Sal, don't, I said, my voice sharp. Just go. And then she was gone. The door closed behind her, and for the first time in what felt like weeks, the house was silent. I sat on the couch, staring at the spot where she had been sitting. I should have felt relief, maybe even triumph. But all I felt was an emptiness that I couldn't shake. The house felt eerily quiet after Connie left. I stayed on the couch for hours, staring at nothing. It was like a part of me was still waiting for her to walk back in, apologize, and promise to fix everything. But I knew better. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Connie and Tony walk away from this unscathed. They hadn't just betrayed me, they had humiliated me, disrespected my family, and tarnished everything I had worked for. If they thought they could do this and move on without consequences, they were wrong. I started with my family. Sunday dinner at my parents' house was a tradition, and this week was no different. My mom had been pestering me to bring Connie, saying it had been too long since she came to a family gathering. I'm coming alone, I told her on the phone. Is everything okay? She asked, her voice laced with concern. Not really, I said. I'll explain when I get there. When I arrived, the whole family was already seated around the table, my parents, my siblings, and a few cousins who'd stopped by. Everyone was in good spirits, laughing and chatting, until they saw my face. Sal, what's wrong? My dad asked, setting down his fork. I took a deep breath, bracing myself. Connie and I are done, I said flatly. The room fell silent. Done? What do you mean? My mom asked, her voice shaking. She's been cheating on me, I said bluntly. With Tony. The reaction was immediate. My dad slammed his fist on the table, cursing under his breath. My mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My siblings exchanged shocked looks, and my cousins started muttering among themselves. Tony, my brother Marco said, his voice filled with disbelief. Enzo's brother? Are you sure? I'm sure, I said. I've got the proof, texts, videos, everything. She's been lying to me for months. My mom started crying, and my dad looked like he wanted to punch a hole in the wall. Marco stood up, pacing the room. That scumbag, he muttered. I knew there was something off about him. Does Enzo know? My dad asked, his face hard. Not yet, I said. But he's about to. That night, I called Enzo and asked to meet him at the restaurant after hours. He sounded confused but agreed. When we sat down at a corner table, I didn't waste time. I told him everything, Connie, Tony, the lies, the proof. I even showed him the video. Enzo was furious. I can't believe this, he said, running a hand through his hair. My own brother. I'm so sorry, Sal. You don't deserve this. It's not your fault, I said. But I thought you should know. Tony's been coming around here, using this place to meet Connie. I won't have him stepping foot in my restaurant again. You have my word, Enzo said firmly. He's done. I'll deal with him. I didn't ask how Enzo planned to handle it. I didn't need to know. All I cared about was that Tony would feel the weight of his actions. By the end of the night, the truth was out, and the wheels were in motion. Connie and Tony's little secret wasn't going to stay hidden anymore. It didn't take long for Enzo to act. When he said he'd deal with Tony, I knew he meant business. Enzo was loyal to his family, but he was also a man of honor. Betrayal wasn't something he could stomach, especially when it tarnished the reputation of those close to him. 2 days after our meeting, I got a call from Enzo. Sal, he said, his voice steady, Tony won't be a problem anymore. What do you mean? I asked, though I had an idea. I had a talk with him, Enzo said. Let's just say he understands how serious this is now. He's leaving town. For good. I leaned back in my chair, a wave of satisfaction washing over me. Did he admit to it? He didn't have much choice after I showed him the evidence you gave me, Enzo said. At first, he tried to deny it, but once he saw the video, he folded. He said it was just a fling, that it didn't mean anything. A fling, I repeated bitterly. That's all my marriage meant to him? He's a coward, Sal. Always has been, Enzo said. But don't worry. He's packing up and heading back to Italy. He won't be showing his face around here again. Good, I said. He's lucky I didn't handle this myself. Enzo chuckled darkly. Trust me, he got the message loud and clear. And if he tries anything, you'll be the first to know. When I hung up the phone, I felt a strange sense of relief. Tony was gone, and with him, one part of the mess was cleaned up. But there was still Connie to deal with. Her departure from the house hadn't been the clean break I'd hoped for. She was texting me daily, begging for another chance, saying she would do anything to make it right. I ignored most of her messages, but one caught my attention. I know I hurt you, she wrote, but please let me explain. Let me show you how sorry I am. Can we meet, just once? I sat staring at the text for a long time. Part of me wanted to block her and move on, but another part, the part that needed closure, was curious to hear what she had to say. I finally replied, keeping it short, tomorrow, 3 p.m., at the restaurant. After hours. Come alone. When the clock struck 3 p.m. the next day, I was already at the restaurant, seated in the back corner booth where Connie and I used to sit on slow days. I had the phone with a video on the table and a folder of printed texts next to it. I wanted to be ready for any excuse or denial she might try to throw my way. She arrived a few minutes late, her face pale and her eyes red. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. I didn't greet her or offer her a seat. I just gestured to the booth across from me. She sat down slowly, clutching her bag in her lap. Thank you for meeting me, she said softly. I didn't respond. I just leaned back and stared at her, waiting for her to speak. She shifted uncomfortably under my gaze. Sal, I don't even know where to start, she began, her voice trembling. Start with the truth, I said coldly. Something you should have done a long time ago. She flinched but nodded. It started months ago, she admitted, her hands twisting in her lap. Tony he was charming, and I was stupid. I never wanted it to go this far. I swear, Sal, I never stopped loving you. I scoffed. You never stopped loving me? That's rich, Connie. You lied to me, betrayed me, and disrespected our marriage, but you loved me. Tears streamed down her face. I made a mistake, she said, her voice cracking. I was weak, and I let things spiral out of control. But it didn't mean anything. It was just a distraction. A distraction, I repeated, my voice laced with bitterness. That's what you call sneaking around, lying to my face, and humiliating me? A distraction. She sobbed harder, but I wasn't done. Do you even realize what you've done, Connie? You didn't just hurt me. You disrespected everything we built together. Our family, our friends, our reputation. You destroyed it all for some meaningless fling. I know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I know I've ruined everything. But I want to make it right, Sal. Please, let me try to fix this. I shook my head, anger boiling beneath the surface. There's no fixing this, Connie. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it. She reached across the table, her hand trembling. Please, she begged. Please don't throw us away. I'll do anything, counseling, therapy, whatever it takes. I'll prove to you that I can change. I pulled my hand away, disgusted by her touch. You don't get it, do you? I said, my voice sharp. There's nothing left to save. You didn't just break my trust, you shattered it. And trust is something you don't get back once it's gone. She broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. I sat there unmoved, watching the woman I once loved fall apart in front of me. Leave the keys to the house, I said finally. You can send someone to pick up the rest of your things. And don't contact me again. We're done, Connie. She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. Sal, please. Goodbye, Connie, I said firmly, standing up and walking away. As I stepped out of the restaurant into the cold afternoon air, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and a hollow sense of finality. It was over. The days after that meeting with Connie felt surreal. It was like a heavy fog had lifted, but in its place was an emptiness I didn't know how to fill. I threw myself into work, spending every waking hour at the restaurant. The kitchen had always been my sanctuary, and now it became my escape. The staff noticed the change in me. I wasn't joking around with them like I used to or checking in on their families. I was quieter, more focused, like I was trying to prove something to myself. Maria, my head waitress and someone I trusted like family, pulled me aside one evening. Sal, she said, her voice gentle, you don't have to do this alone. We're here for you, you know. I nodded, forcing a small smile. Thanks, Maria. I appreciate it. But I didn't open up. Not to her, not to anyone. How could I? The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was public. People in the community were starting to whisper. Word had gotten out, as it always does in a small circle, and customers were asking questions without asking directly. Connie hasn't been around much, one regular said casually. I just nodded, giving a neutral answer. She's dealing with some personal stuff. But inside, it ate away at me. I hated that people were talking about my life like it was a soap opera. And worse, I hated that they might pity me. Then there were the practical matters. Connie had been part of my life for so long that untangling her from it felt like trying to undo a knot in a fishing net. Bank accounts, bills, shared memberships, it was a mess. I spent hours on the phone, closing joint accounts and changing passwords. Each call was a reminder of what I'd lost, what she had thrown away. One afternoon, I finally decided to clean out the house. Her things were still in the bedroom, hanging in the closet like she might walk back in at any moment. I grabbed a few boxes and started packing everything up, her clothes, her jewelry, even the little knickknacks she had scattered around the house. As I packed, I came across a photo album. It was one of those old-fashioned ones, filled with pictures from our early days together. Trips to Italy, anniversaries, holidays, it was all there. I flipped through the pages, each picture a reminder of a time when I thought we had everything. When I reached the end, I closed the album and set it in the box. I didn't know what else to do with it, but I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. By the time I finished, the house felt different. Quieter. Colder. It wasn't just the absence of her things, it was the absence of the life we had shared. But as painful as it was, I knew this was a step I had to take. If I was going to move forward, I couldn't let her shadow linger over everything. Cleaning out the house gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in weeks. It was painful, sure, but it was also necessary. Connie's things were gone, and with them, some of the weight pressing down on me. But there was still the matter of the world outside my walls, the people who knew us, the community that had seen us as a perfect couple for so long. Running an Italian restaurant isn't just about food. It's about relationships. Every customer who walks through the door isn't just a sale, they're part of a larger web of connections. And when your personal life becomes a topic of gossip, it spreads fast. It started small. Customers who had known us for years would glance around, their eyes searching for Connie. Some of them were bold enough to ask, "Where's Connie these days?" One older man asked me while waiting for his takeout. "She used to help out on busy nights, didn't she?" I plastered on a polite smile, the kind that doesn't reach your eyes. "She's not here anymore," I said simply, handing him his bag. He frowned but didn't press further. Others weren't as subtle. A family friend, Mrs. Romano, cornered me one evening. She'd been like an aunt to me growing up, so I suppose she felt entitled to pry. "Salvatore," she said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "I heard some things about you and Connie. Is everything all right?" I set down the wine bottle I was holding, taking a deep breath before answering. "Everything's fine, Mrs. Romano," I said evenly. "Connie and I are no longer together. That's all there is to it." Her face softened, and she reached out to pat my hand. "I'm sorry to hear that, Caro. If you need anything, you know where to find me." I nodded, grateful for her kindness but frustrated by the constant reminders of what had happened. A week later, Enzo stopped by the restaurant. He hadn't been around since I confronted him about Tony, and I could tell he felt awkward. He sat at the bar, his usual confidence dimmed. "How's it going, Sal?" he asked, swirling his espresso. I shrugged. "Same as always. Busy, keeping my head down." He nodded, his eyes darting around like he was working up the courage to say something. Finally, he sighed and leaned in closer. "Listen, I wanted to warn you about something." "Warn me?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Tony's been talking," he said, his voice low, "to some of the guys who used to hang around him. He's trying to spin the story, make himself look like the victim." My jaw clenched. "What's he saying?" "Nothing that matters," Enzo said quickly. "Just that you overreacted, that it wasn't a big deal. Typical Tony, trying to cover his tracks. But I wanted you to know, in case it gets back to you." I leaned on the bar, my anger simmering. Of course he's playing the victim. That's all he knows how to do. But let him talk, Enzo. People like that don't stay quiet for long, and the more he opens his mouth, the more he'll expose himself for what he is. Enzo nodded, but I could see the tension in his face. "If he comes back, you let me know," he said. "He's not welcome here, not in the family, not in the community. You have my word." I appreciated his loyalty, but it didn't make the situation any easier. Knowing Tony was out there, spreading lies, was like a splinter under my skin. I wanted to confront him, to put him in his place once and for all. But I also knew that would only drag me further into the mess he'd created. The fallout from Connie's betrayal extended further than I had expected. Some people sided with me, offering quiet support or a pat on the back when they thought I needed it. Others, those closer to Connie, kept their distance, their silence speaking volumes. One evening, Maria pulled me aside again. "Sal, people are going to talk," she said gently. "That's just how it is. But the people who matter, the ones who've known you for years, they're not going anywhere. Don't let the gossip get to you." I nodded, grateful for her words but still feeling the weight of the whispers. It wasn't just about me, it was about my family, my restaurant, my reputation. Everything I'd built was now tied to a story I never wanted to tell. But Maria was right. I couldn't let the gossip consume me. I had a business to run, employees who depended on me, and a future that I refused to let Connie or Tony ruin. As I closed up the restaurant that night, I stood in the dining room, staring at the empty tables. This place had always been a symbol of everything I stood for: hard work, family, pride. Now, it was a reminder of what I had to rebuild. In the weeks that followed, the whispers began to fade, but the wounds were still fresh. My days were filled with work, managing the restaurant, juggling orders, training new staff, and my nights were spent in a house that no longer felt like home. Connie's absence left a void, but I refused to let it swallow me whole. I wasn't completely alone though. My family, friends, and even some of the restaurant regulars rallied around me in quiet but meaningful ways. Marco came by the restaurant almost every night, sitting at the bar while I worked, offering a presence that didn't require words. "You're stronger than you think, Fratello," he said one night as he sipped his espresso. "People like Tony and Connie, they don't understand loyalty. But you've got it, in spades. Don't forget that." I nodded, appreciating his words but not fully feeling them. It was hard to focus on loyalty when betrayal was still fresh in my mind. One Friday evening, as I was locking up the restaurant, a car pulled into the lot. At first, I thought it was a customer who hadn't realized we were closed, but as the driver stepped out, I recognized her immediately. It was Connie's sister, Teresa. She approached hesitantly, her hands stuffed in her coat pockets. "Sal," she said, her voice soft. "Can we talk?" I leaned against the door, crossing my arms. "What do you want, Teresa?" She sighed, looking down at the pavement. "I'm not here to defend Connie, if that's what you're worried about. I wanted to see how you're doing." "How I'm doing?" I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping me. "I'm doing great, Teresa. My marriage is over, my reputation's taken a hit, and your sister is off somewhere playing the victim. Couldn't be better." She winced, but she didn't argue. "Look, I know she messed up. I told her as much. I haven't been talking to her much lately, it's too hard. But I've been thinking about you, about everything you've gone through. You didn't deserve this." I softened slightly, surprised by her honesty. "So why are you here?" "To apologize," she said. "Not for Connie, she needs to do that herself. But for not stepping in sooner. For not noticing what was happening. I should have seen the signs." I stared at her, unsure how to respond. Part of me wanted to tell her it wasn't her responsibility, but another part was angry that so many people had been blind to what was right in front of them. "I appreciate that," I said finally, my voice calmer. "But it's done now. Nothing you or anyone else says can change what happened." She nodded, her eyes misty. "For what it's worth, Sal, my family's on your side. Mom and Dad are furious with Connie, and they've made it clear they don't condone what she did. You're still part of our family, no matter what." Her words hit me harder than I expected. Despite everything, there were still people who saw me as more than the man Connie betrayed. "Thanks, Teresa," I said quietly. "That means a lot." That conversation stayed with me for days. It reminded me that, despite the betrayal, I wasn't completely alone. My family, my friends, even Connie's family, they were all rooting for me in their own way. One evening, as I stood in the kitchen prepping for the next day's service, Maria walked in with a stack of receipts. "You know," she said, setting them on the counter, "I've worked for you for 10 years now. Seen a lot of things, but one thing's always been clear, you're a fighter, Sal. You don't let anything break you." I chuckled, shaking my head. "I don't feel like much of a fighter right now, Maria." "Well, you are," she said firmly. "And don't forget it. This place, these people, they're here because of you. Not Connie, not anyone else. Just you." Her words lit a spark in me, one I hadn't felt in weeks. Maybe she was right. Maybe I wasn't as broken as I thought. That night, I sat at the dining table with a notebook, scribbling down ideas for the restaurant, new menu items, renovations, ways to bring in more customers. If nothing else, I was going to pour everything I had into rebuilding my life, one step at a time. Connie and Tony might have taken a part of me, but they wouldn't take everything. The days turned into weeks, and slowly, the sting of betrayal dulled, though it never disappeared completely. I kept busy, throwing myself into the restaurant with everything I had. The routine was comforting, even if it was exhausting. There was something steady about the rhythm of chopping vegetables, kneading dough, and hearing the sizzle of olive oil in a hot pan. It was work that didn't ask questions or betray you, it just needed to be done. I noticed the shift in the way people treated me. Some of the regulars were warmer, like they were silently offering their support. Others avoided eye contact, as if my heartbreak might be contagious. And then there were those who looked at me with pity. Those were the hardest to face. One night, as I was cleaning up after closing, Maria stayed late. She often did that now, even when I didn't ask her to. She was wiping down tables while I tackled the kitchen, the two of us working in companionable silence. "You know," she said finally, breaking the quiet, "I think the place has been busier lately." I glanced up from the sink, raising an eyebrow. "Busier?" "Yeah," she said, leaning against a table. "I think people are coming to support you. Word's gotten around about everything. They want to show they're on your side." I didn't know what to say to that. It was comforting in a way, but also humiliating. I didn't want my life to be reduced to gossip fodder or a charity cause. Still, Maria was probably right. "Well," I said, drying my hands on a towel, "as long as they're eating, I don't care why they're here." She laughed, but her expression softened. "They're here because they respect you, Sal. You're a good man. Don't forget that." I nodded, though her words sat heavy in my chest. Respect was something I'd always prided myself on. It was the backbone of my family, my restaurant, and my marriage, or so I'd thought. Now it felt like I was rebuilding it from the ground up, piece by piece. The next morning, I decided it was time to focus on more than just surviving. If the restaurant was going to thrive, I needed to give people a reason to keep coming back. I sat in my office with a notepad and started sketching out ideas. New dishes, themed nights, even a small expansion. I wanted to breathe new life into the place. It was about more than business. It was about proving to myself that I could move forward, that I could still build something meaningful, even after everything that had happened. In the evenings, I found myself spending more time with my family. My brother Marco would swing by after work, and my parents invited me over for dinner more often than they used to. At first, I resisted, feeling like they were treating me like some wounded animal. But eventually, I realized they weren't pitying me. They were reminding me that I wasn't alone. One Sunday, over a plate of my mom's lasagna, my dad looked at me with that stern but loving expression he always wore when he was about to give advice. "Salvatore," he said, his voice firm, "this isn't the end for you. I know it feels like it, but it's not. You're stronger than this." "I don't feel strong," I admitted. "Strength isn't about how you feel," he said, slicing into his lasagna. "It's about what you do. And you're doing what needs to be done. Keep doing that, and one day, you'll look back and see how far you've come." I nodded, his words sinking in. He was right. I couldn't let Connie and Tony's betrayal define me. I had too much to lose: my family, my restaurant, my pride. That night, I sat at home, staring at the empty living room that once felt warm and full. It still hurt, and I knew it would for a long time. But for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of something else: hope. Hope that this wasn't the end. Hope that I could rebuild, even stronger than before.